Hello my loves, it's Monica and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm so excited because I'm going to be sharing with you all my most anticipated books that are coming out this fall. Basically the last chunk of the year is here, which is wild to me. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk about all these books. I've broken it down to my top 10 most anticipated releases, and I've got a wide array of genres here that I just cannot wait to get my hands on. And I'd love to hear from you all. What are the books that you're most excited for that are coming out in the last few months of this year? Let me know in the comments down below. But before I dive in to share all the books with you guys, I do want to give a big thank you to this video's sponsor, which is Factor. I have been working with them for a little while and I love it. It's a really cool service that basically makes meal planning super easy by delivering fresh pre-made meals right to your door. Their meals are made from scratch by real chefs using the freshest ingredients, and they are never frozen, and they're just delicious. And I love that you're able to really customize your menu. So either Factor can create a menu for you based on your taste preferences and history, or you can go in and choose your meals for yourself, and they always have new meals every week. And I also love the service because you can really define what type of meals you want based off of your dietary needs and preferences. So if you eat only seafood, if you are a meat eater, if you're vegan, if you're vegetarian, etc. There's lots of different options based on your preferences and needs, which I think is fantastic. And for me, these pre-portioned meals are just the perfect solution for people who need a sort of no hassle way to meal plan and meal prep and just like have access to food in general. I know for me, and I've talked about this in the past, I've struggled with the fact that when I get involved in a project or a task, it is very, very difficult for me to step away from it. Like once I'm starting something, then like I am fixated on it for hours. And so taking a break to go make lunch or make dinner is really difficult for me, and I am working on that. But it's also been so revolutionary to have Factor, because now instead of waiting until 8 p.m. to finally eat something when I'm starving and then suddenly ordering takeout, I could just, heat up a Factor meal. It takes literal minutes. You just pop it into the microwave or the oven, and it takes minutes to have a really delicious meal. And I love that. The way that I describe it is it's like always having like yummy leftovers in your fridge. If you would like to try out Factor, you can use my code MonicaKim130, and that gets you $130 off your first 6 boxes, which is pretty amazing. And you can head to the link down below to learn more. So thank you so much to Factor. Really excited to be continuing to work with them because genuinely the service has revolutionized my life. And now without further ado, let's dive on in and talk about the books. So the first book might actually already be out by the time this video goes live, but I'm very excited for it regardless, and that is House of Hunger by Alexis Henderson. And Alexis Henderson is the author of The Year of the Witching, which is a book that I really enjoyed. I feel like she just did atmosphere, like gothic atmosphere, unlike anything I've read recently. The best way I can describe it is like if you took the atmosphere from the first season of Sabrina and made it like even creepier. That's like what it felt like to read The Year of the Witching, and I loved that. Like if you took away the sort of like modern day teen drama from Sabrina, that's what Year of the Witching was kind of like reading. And in this one, we have moved on from witches to vampires. It's set in a historic alternate version of Europe that is ruled over by these aristocratic vampires, and our main character is a blood maid, which is basically, I guess, what it sounds like a woman who is used or hired by the vampires to be feasted on, for lack of a better term. And yeah, it just sounds super dark gothic, and I'm just really so intrigued to see Alexis Henderson's take on the vampire, and I feel like it's going to be the most perfect October read. Then on October 4th, Celeste Ng's new book comes out, and Celeste Ng is one of my absolute favorite authors, and this one just sounds sensational. It's called Our Missing Hearts, and in this one, Celeste Ng is pulling from America's past to create America's future. So she's writing a sort of future dystopian novel. She is imagining this dystopian future in which Asian Americans are viewed as suspicious threats to the American life, basically, to people, to the government, and to be viewed as a dissident means to be like removed from society. And if you're the child of a dissident, then you are relocated. In it, we follow this young boy Bird, who is 12 years old, and his mother disappeared when he was 9 after her poetry and art was used by dissidents as like a rallying cry, and he has had to learn to just completely disavow her and her work. And then one day a mysterious letter shows up and he believes it's his mom. Honestly, when I first read the synopsis, I got really choked up because, you know, I think innately, you know, because I think like while yes, she is imagining a dystopian future, she is also very much pulling from the current and previous experiences of Asian people in this country. Like, you see it in really small ways often in our society, in ways in which Asians are just automatically seen as suspicious and not worthy of trust. And it's something that's sort of like almost innate to our culture, innate to American culture. And yeah, I'm excited. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm excited for this book, excited for it to break me and for me to get really angry while reading it. And I think it'll be a really important one, especially like, you know, this idea of being relocated, like that is not a new one for Asian people in this country. And again, I feel like exploring the idea of what it is to exist in a country where you are seen as always suspicious or always worthy of mistrust is going to be very compelling and important. So very excited for this one, and I'm sure it'll raise up a lot of discussions, and I'm excited to have those. Next, on October 18th, we have Lavender House by Lev A.C. Rosen, and this one has been pitched as Knives Out, but with a queer historical angle. Basically, we follow Evander Mills, who is a gay detective from the 1950s, and he is recently out of a job because he was fired after he was discovered during a police raid for basically like raiding a gay club, and he was discovered, and he was a police officer, and he got fired after being discovered, and so he's out of work, and he ends up getting hired by the head of the Lavender House, the family, I forget the name of the family. Anyways, the family's basically like made all their money off of soap, and Lavender House is their manor, but it's been very closed off from the world because inside of Lavender House is this sort of safe space for queer people where everyone from the residents to the staff are able to freely be who they truly are. And at the same time, there is now a murderer within their midst. So Evander is brought in to try and solve this mystery. Sorry for any changes in position, my camera battery died. Anyways, as I was saying, I am just really intrigued for this one because I just find it interesting, the sort of like combination of the queer found family trope mixed with a murder mystery, like whodunit murder mystery. I've just personally never read a mystery like that, and I'm excited to do that this October. Then also coming out on October 18th is Demon Copperfield by Barbara Kingsolver, and this is a retelling of Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, and I'm super intrigued for that. So with David Copperfield, Dickens was really trying to shine a light on the experience of growing up poor in England, and just how horrific it was to grow up as a poor child. And I am super interested in this take because this book takes place in modern day America, specifically following a boy who is born into poverty to a teen mom in Appalachia, and we watch him grow up in this sort of the same way that you watch David Copperfield grow up. We watch him go through like child labor, going in and out of the foster system. And for me, I'm just super intrigued to see the parallels between the time period that Dickens was writing about and the time period that this author is writing about, because obviously like we are in a very different time, but at the same time, like children are still experiencing these atrocities because of because they're born into poverty. And I think that especially shining a light on that within America is really important, because I often think that people like to view, like when you are from like a Western country, you like to view like these atrocities, these horrors as like in our past, and that like they're not ones that currently exist today, but they do. And I'm also intrigued for this one because I know that the main character is also sort of looking at his own sort of invisibility in popular culture in general, which I think is so real. I feel that so often. Like, I'm someone who grew up poor, and whenever I watch like shows, films, anything, like, it's just crazy to me, the reality of my childhood versus the reality of the children that I see on television, and the access to things, the just like the way that their houses look, even how like new their cars are. Like, it's kind of crazy when you watch media how invisible poorness is, and like the experience of being poor is. I feel like the only show that I could think of is either ones where like you are depicted as like a victim, and that's all you are, like you're not like a full human being. Or the only other one I can think of is Roseanne, the show, and that I remember growing up on and it being so important to me, because it was like, oh my gosh, this family looks like my family, like they have the struggles of my family. I remember just like discovering Roseanne on like, I think Nick at Night or something, and loving it because of that, because it was like one of the first times where I really got to see like that type of dynamic or that experience portrayed on television. And yeah, I'm very intrigued for this book in particular, and just to like see this author's point of view on all of that, which I think is really important. So yeah, that is Demon Copperhead. Now, November 1st is randomly a very big day for Korean literature. I don't know why this day was picked, but I have 3 different books that are by Korean authors that I am so excited for. The first one is I Want to Die But I Want to Eat Tteokbokki by Paek Si-hee, and this one is kind of a memoir, technically a memoir, but apparently it's like unlike any memoir you've ever read before. In it, the author basically transcribes their therapy sessions, and no topic is off limits. It's supposed to be a very just honest portrayal of mental health, and I'm really excited for that. And especially as someone who, obviously I grew up Korean, and mental health is like such an interesting discussion within Korean communities, and I'm just intrigued to see this author's depiction of that, because one, I think just like showing going to therapy is so important in general, but especially within Korean culture, like normalizing that and normalizing these sort of conversations I think is just vital, and I'm really excited that these conversations are happening. But yeah, for that reason alone, I'm excited for this one, and I've just heard from so many people who have read it that it was really like touching, so very excited for this one. Then on November 1st, The World Keeps Ending But the World Goes On by Franny Choi comes out, and this is a poetry collection, and normally I don't include poetry collections in these kinds of videos. I'm just not really a poetry expert. I do enjoy poetry when I read it, but yeah, it's never really enough that I like am like, oh yeah, that's one of my most anticipated collections. But this one just sounds so amazing. So the whole premise of the story is sort of taking on the idea of like apocalypses, and you know, we often like talk about like this one day, like what if the apocalypse happens, and we see so many stories of apocalypses, and in this book the author is basically trying to portray what it's like, what life is like for people who have already lived through an apocalypse. And I've noticed this conversation finally happening around stories like, for example, The Handmaid's Tale, where it's shown as this dystopic apocalyptic future, but in reality it's basically showing these actual things that have happened to Black women, to Indigenous women, but showing it happening to white women, and that's what is making it horrific almost. From the synopsis, Choi considers the many ways in which the unthinkable has already happened for the most marginalized around the world by way of catastrophe, war, and devastation, touching on everything from the Korean comfort women during World War II to the very present climate crisis. Choi draws attention to the traumas that people have already experienced and calls for solidarity for the future. So I think that's super important, because I do think like in our media, when we talk about the future, when we talk about these like horrible atrocities, we often ignore that these atrocities are already happening for so many people around the world, and almost like what we're afraid of is them happening then to like people with the most power. And yeah, I'm just reading that synopsis just gave me chills, made me so excited to read this story, and especially to read it from like a Korean point of view, because you know, if you know anything about Korean history, if you know, I talk to my mom sometimes and I'm like, you have lived through basically an apocalypse. And yeah, so just very excited for this one. Then lastly, also on November 1st is Saha by Cho Namju, and this is one of my favorite authors. She wrote Kim Ji-young, born 1982, which is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. It is a very controversial book in Korea. It has a very controversial film adaptation. It is a super feminist look at the life of Korean women, and I highly recommend it. It's sensational. And this is their next book. This book is a dystopian story taking place in a country called Town, and in this place a renowned doctor is murdered, and the law enforcement basically decides that the only place where this gruesome murder could have occurred is within this very poor area within Town. And these two siblings, Do-kyung and Jin-kyung, become the prime suspects. But then when Do-kyung goes missing, his sister goes out to try and just figure out what happened, try to find him, and it unravels a lot of truths about Town and the residents. All right, so I have one more book that's coming out November 1st. This one's not Korean though, and it's called The Cloisters by Katie Hayes, and this one is supposed to be The Secret History meets Ninth House, which are two of my favorite books. So that's a really high praise, really tall order to try and achieve. But I'm also super excited for this one because my favorite museum in the city are the Met Cloisters, which is where this book takes place. It's kind of like if you don't live in Manhattan or Upper Manhattan, it's kind of a trek to get to, but it is so worth it. It is so beautiful. One of my absolute favorite places to just spend a few hours reading, wandering, and all of that. And yeah, it really does feel like magical and the kind of place that would be perfect for this kind of book's setting. This is a fantasy dark academia. We follow a character, Anne, right? Anne, who is assigned to the Cloisters as part of her internship, and while she's there, she discovers this deck of tarot cards, and that sort of sends her on her journey. They're magical tarot cards, obviously, and I'm super intrigued for that also, like tarot card magic. There's a couple books coming out that have like tarot card magic this fall that I'm intrigued for, but this is the one that I'm most intrigued for because of the setting, and I really hope it's good because I love the Cloisters so much. So I hope that it captures just the feeling of being there, which can be so magical, and like there are just some rooms in there that legitimately do feel like they could be from like a fantasy show or something, like just the way the lighting is and stuff. Anyways, maybe if I'm really into the book, I might like do a little reading vlog from the Cloisters. We'll see. Then on November 8th, The Stars Undying by Emery Robin comes out, and this one sounds so good. It is a space opera that is inspired by the tale of Antony, Cleopatra, and what's his name, Julius Caesar. And yeah, I love stories like this where like it pulls from mythology, from history, and create something totally new. So I'm super intrigued. We follow Princess Allegracia, whose twin sister has taken over the throne, taken her birthright, and she is now on this, she's now exiled, and in her exile she ends up crossing path with the most powerful man in the galaxy, and they end up teaming up. And yeah, I don't really know a whole lot more. Like I feel like I read the synopsis and it just kind of gets a little bit, it was kind of getting a little bit too much into the detail of the plot, so I stopped reading it. So I wouldn't recommend personally reading the synopsis. But yeah, super intrigued for this one, and just to see how the author takes this very like classic story that so many people know and translates it into like a space opera. I feel like we need more space operas. I love a good space opera personally, and especially to see like this story in space opera format. Oh my gosh, it's gonna be so good. It's gonna break me is what it's gonna do. And I'm excited. And then lastly, also coming out on November 8th is Even Though I Knew the End by C.L. Polk, and this is supposed to be a lesbian fantasy noir, like mystery, set in 1930s, I believe, Chicago. And just all of that sounds so good in and of itself. We follow a magical detective who is working with their love, and she is investigating the plights of the magical creatures of Chicago. This book just looks like it combines so many things that I love in fiction. We've got magic, intrigue, mystery, romance, and I'm just so intrigued for it. It looks and sounds super atmospheric. I've been really keen to read C.L. Polk in general. I've like almost purchased books from them in the past, so I think this will be a good first read for me. If you've read any of their books though, I'd love to know your thoughts. I'd love to know your thoughts on any of these books, honestly, or just whatever books you are excited for. Again, let me know about them in the comments down below, or which of these are you most intrigued for. Definitely let me know so I know maybe which ones I should be doing reading vlogs for in the future. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you want to find me elsewhere, I am of course on Instagram and TikTok. But yeah, I hope you all have the most wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye!